Michigan. CBS News Detroit at 7 starts now.
Good evening. Thanks for staying with us tonight on CBS News Detroit at 7. I'm Jeff Skaversky.
I'm Shayna Humphreys. Our top story tonight is not local, but it could have an impact around the country. 5 former Memphis police officers are facing murder charges for the violent arrest of Tyree Nichols.
Nichols died in the hospital earlier this month, 3 days after a police traffic stop that turned violent. Today, those former police officers turned themselves into authorities.
CBS News' Elise Preston has the latest from Memphis.
The Shelby County District Attorney announced criminal charges, including second-degree murder, against 5 former Memphis police officers involved in a traffic stop that led to the death of Tyree Nichols.
The actions of all of them resulted in the death of Tyree Nichols, and they are all responsible.
The 5 officers who were fired last week following an internal Memphis Police Department probe surrendered to authorities Thursday.
Let me be clear. What happened here does not at all reflect proper policing. This was wrong. This was criminal.
Authorities plan to make public body camera video of the officer's encounter with the 29-year-old on January 7th. His family saw the video earlier this week.
All I heard my son say was, "What did I do?" Where's the humanity in all of this?
The Memphis police chief issued a statement late Wednesday urging protesters to remain peaceful and saying the department's investigation is ongoing.
This is not just a professional failing. This is a failing of basic humanity toward another individual. This incident was heinous, reckless, and inhumane.
Nichols was a father, FedEx worker, and avid skateboarder. His funeral is planned for next week. Elise Preston, CBS News, Memphis, Tennessee.
New tonight, a Virginia teacher who was shot by a 6-year-old student earlier this month now says administrators failed to act despite 3 warnings the child may have had a gun at the school. Assistant principal resigned yesterday and is now facing pending legal action and intense scrutiny. The school board in Virginia voted last night to also remove the superintendent. CBS News' Jerika Duncan has more.
This should have never happened. It was preventable.
Attorney Diane Toscano represents shooting victim Abby Zwerner. Toscano said school personnel, quote, could not be bothered to act even after several warnings about the 6-year-old shooter. And she outlined hours of alleged inaction before the child fired at Zwerner. Around 11:15 a.m., she said Zwerner told an administrator that the student threatened to beat up another child, but the 6-year-old was not removed from the class. At 12:30 p.m., Toscano said another teacher told an administrator she'd searched the child's backpack after suspecting he had a gun, but she found no weapon and worried that he'd put the firearm in his pocket. Toscano said the administrator downplayed that possibility by replying, well, he has little pockets. Around 30 minutes later, Toscano said a third teacher told an administrator that a student claimed the suspect had showed him a gun during recess and threatened to shoot him if he told anyone. Yet again, Toscano said nothing was done. She also alleged that when another school employee asked to search the boy, he was turned down.
He was told to wait the situation out because the school day was almost over. Let that sink in.
Roughly an hour later, Toscano said the 6-year-old fired at Zwerner, who has since been discharged from the hospital and is continuing her recovery.
Abby Zwerner was shot in front of those horrified kids, and the school and community are living the nightmare. All because the school administration failed to act.
A spokesperson for the school district declined to comment on those allegations and did not respond to our request for the details of the school's protocol for reporting incidents like this one to police. Now, local authorities say they did not receive a call about a possible weapon at Rich Neck Elementary until after the shooting happened. Jerika Duncan, CBS News, New York.
The city of Pontiac is facing another massive lawsuit over its ongoing delays in issuing medical marijuana licenses. According to the Crain's Detroit report, a group of real estate developers is accusing the city of Pontiac of dragging its feet in issuing a permit for nearly 4 years. The plaintiffs claim it cost them $45 million in loans and several tenants for the proposed development. The lawsuit, which seeks nearly $60 million in damages plus legal fees, is the latest in a string of legal actions against the city, which has yet to issue a single medical marijuana license more than 4 years after the issue was declined upon voters.
The fight over the rightful ownership of a Van Gogh painting at the Detroit Institute of Arts is not over. Today, a federal appeals court ordered the museum to hold on to the artwork until further notice. This is a story we've been following for some time. Our Ray Strickland is on Woodward in Midtown with what's next as the legal battle makes its way through court.
The Vincent Van Gogh exhibit here at the Detroit Institute of Arts may be over, but the legal battle over who should be in possession of his painting novel Reader is far from it. And now a federal appeals court is, at least for now, siding with the collector who sued the museum, telling the DIA to hold on to that painting until further notice.
Federal appeals court judges are ruling in favor of a Brazilian collector who claims a Vincent Van Gogh painting that was on display at the Detroit Institute of Arts was stolen from him years ago. After a district judge dismissed the collector's lawsuit to force the DIA to return it, the federal appeals court is granting the collector's request for an injunction. And now the court is ordering the museum to keep it until further notice.
I wouldn't assume that because it's gone to the appeals court that the ruling is going to change in the end.
The Brazilian collector Gustavo Soter claims he bought the Van Gogh painting back in 2017 but gave it to a third party to store it. In court filings, Soter claims they eventually lost contact and the painting, known as the novel Reader, was nowhere to be found until Soter saw it at the DIA. What's interesting here is the museum was loaned the artwork and the DIA was later granted protection under what's called the Immunity from Seizure Act, given to objects loaned from overseas.
It's hard to say. I mean, the DIA does not play any role in this. It is a completely innocent party. They've done everything that they're supposed to do. They've done it.
Jeffrey Abt, an art and art history professor from Wayne State University, says it will also be hard for a judge to force the museum to give it back to Soter since it has a contract with the person who loaned it to them.
And it's not entirely clear that any court can tell the DIA to just willy-nilly tear up that contract.
In a statement, a spokesperson for the DIA said this in response to the order, quote, "The DIA will fully comply with the order from the U.S. Court of Appeals regarding the custody of the novel Reader and will be responding on January 30th to the plaintiff's recent pleading. The DIA will have no further comment prior to a ruling by the court."
And I did reach out to the attorney of the man suing the DIA, but was told he will not comment. Reporting in Detroit, Ray Strickland, CBS News, Detroit.
And for those of you in Wayne County, our Ray Strickland is always covering what matters to you in your community.
We finally have some snow. That means cold weather is back, but we still don't know about the ice on the lakes.
In tonight's Science of Weather, meteorologist Ahmed Badji tells us when you can finally get back out on the ice.
And that's a big issue for a lot of anglers out there. This time last year, let's rewind it, just 1 year, we were at almost 24% of the entire Great Lakes covered in ice, and enough that you could actually walk on it. Right now, how about 5%? That's all we've got, and that's an issue. It takes a lot for us to freeze everything over. Lake St. Clair, usually one of the first ones to freeze solid, and we are nowhere near getting anything on that, just enough to be able to go out on. Here's the thing, though. We have a ton of cold air next week. We could grab another 5% just next week alone, with the fact highs will be in the low 20s and our lows overnight will be down almost into the single digits. When we get there, though, here's the issue. 2 inches or less for all the ice cover, that's going to be something. Going into the ice fishing, snowmobiles, ATVs, looking at 5 to 6 inches there that we have to watch for trying to get out on the ice. Cars, trucks, it takes almost a foot for the ice thickness for you to be able to go out and drive on. And by the time you get into the real heavy part of the winter, by the time we get into late February, you can get up to almost 15 inches thick for the ice. And that is when you start to see people driving their trucks out onto the ice. And that does happen. Back in 2014, the winter, one of the coldest ones, 2013 into 2014, that we have had in southeast Michigan, the ice ended up nearly 80 inches thick in parts of southern Lake Huron. That is a wild number to think. People were able to drive their RVs actually out onto the ice. But it takes a while for us to even build up to 4 inches thick for somebody to be able to walk on. An important thing that goes along with that, ice doesn't flex, it doesn't bend, it doesn't act like a lot of different things. It gets a crack, and it is cracked before you finally get a chance to freeze it back over. So once we get into that colder air next week, that should help us out a lot to be able to finally rebuild some of that ice cover, and also, with one other thing, finally actually start to shut down some of that lake effect snow that goes along with it. So, Jeff and Shana, the big thing with that as well, huge for us, not just for people fishing, but I mentioned lake effect. The more open water you have, the longer lake effect snow will continue. It's one of the reasons Buffalo gets hit for so long, because it takes a lot to freeze over the length of Lake Erie. For us, we just have to freeze just a couple miles of Lake Michigan, and we're nowhere near that just yet.
Not much of an angler myself, but maybe if we got enough ice, I might try it out.
It's cold. Be ready for that
Yeah,
part.
I'll pay attention closely to the forecast. Thank you,
I'll go
Ahmed.
with you in August.
There we go.
When we return, we will be joined by two guests tonight to discuss Governor Whitmer's plan for what she calls common sense gun laws. Stay with us.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Macomb County. Hi, we're CBS News Detroit. But we don't just cover the news here. We're also here, and everywhere in between. You know, the places you live, work, and play in Southeast Michigan. We're talking less of this, and more of the stories that actually matter to you.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock.
That's right, local news just found a home in your neighborhood. We're CBS News Detroit, live, streaming, and on demand. Nice to meet you. CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Wayne County. CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Monroe County.
CBS News Detroit, the stories you care about.
Live, streaming, and on demand. We're on your block, around the clock.
Southeast Michigan news whenever you want it.
We live here. We work here.
From North Branch to Southgate.
East Point to Westland.
Wherever you live, we're here for you.
Making a difference in your neighborhood.
CBS News Detroit, live, streaming, and on demand. Building a better newscast, one story at a time.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Oakland County.
How would you build the newscast of the future?
Expect the unexpected.
CBS News Detroit.
CBS News Detroit.
Southeast Michigan news whenever you want it.
We're ready to go live from your community.
Anywhere, anytime.
Live streaming and on demand.
That's the name of the game.
We are ready. CBS News Detroit, in your neighborhood. Live, streaming, and on demand.
Despite pleas from Oxford families, these issues never even got a hearing in the last legislature. This year, let's change that. Let's work together to stop the violence and to save lives. The time for only thoughts and prayers is over.
Plan last night. Thank you for joining us. Governor Whitmer laid out her plan last night for what she calls common sense gun laws in her State of the State address.
Yeah, her remarks is drawing backlash, though, from the Second Amendment advocates who call her agenda the first step to infringe on your gun rights.
Joining us to talk about this tonight, we have two special guests who stand on opposite sides of this controversial issue. Next to me here is Rick Ector, owner of Rick's Firearms Academy in Detroit, where he says business is booming, especially among women looking to carry a gun for self-defense.
And also joined by Detroit School Board member Sherry Gay Daniego, who's also a former state rep from Detroit. She thinks the governor has it exactly right with this plan for gun reforms in the state. The governor wanted 3 basic gun safety measures here: red flag laws, universal background checks, and to enact safe storage laws. You think she gets it right here?
Absolutely. During and before COVID, we've seen an uptick in the challenges that many of our citizens are having, unfortunately, with respect to mental health. Red flag laws are important, and many states have gotten it right, moving to a place where those that are around them, that love their family members and people that they know, that can sound the alarm for someone whose life might be in jeopardy or will put somebody else's life in jeopardy. This is not a place where we're trying to take everyone's guns away. We can think beyond that. We're America. We're the state of Michigan. We can still allow for gun ownership. We're just saying responsible gun ownership, background checks to make sure that those who actually have licensure for guns, their guns are in the right hands. And so what's wrong with that? And I think every time this conversation comes about, there becomes this partisan division that shouldn't exist. We should all want to make sure that our children are safe, our communities are safe, and that people are responsible that own guns.
Now, Rick, as Sherry just mentioned, a key part of this that the governor is talking about is universal background checks. Before you tell us exactly how you feel about that potential policy, what is the current process? If I want to go buy a gun right now from your shop or maybe from a gun show, a different situation, can I just do that? Is there a way I can do it without a background check?
If you want to buy a brand new gun from a retailer, of course, you would need to have a background check, and they would actually perform that through the NICS system. And in many cases, they can actually have that done in a matter of moments. And in a few select circumstances, you may be delayed for a couple of days or so. I think one of the issues that the people on the other side of the issue have concerns with is if we're talking about a loan gun, and not a loan gun that's brand new. A brand new gun, whether it's a loan gun, whether it's a rifle or a shotgun, as opposed to a handgun. If it's brand new, there's a background check performed by the FFL, the Federal Firearms Licensee. Where we tend to run into problems is when we discuss used firearms, and that's this whole issue of universal background checks, is that now they want to introduce and legislate background checks on firearms that are not an issue by and large by the people that own and possess them. For the most part, the vast majority of people misusing firearms are not law-abiding citizens. There's criminals who are not able to lawfully and legally own a firearm. You look at any major story locally or across the country, it was already someone who was already prohibited from owning a gun, especially if we're talking about a long gun. Now, the thing with long guns, statistically, people run a better odds of being victimized by someone with a knife by a 4-to-1 margin. You're talking about people being victimized with sticks, rocks, stones, and then you have long guns, which of course would be rifles and shotguns. They are primarily not the issue. Yes, we all want to do our best to do whatever we can within our society to reduce the incidence of violence, but law-abiding citizens who have proven statistically that they're not the problem, that's barking up the wrong tree.
To take that one step further, though, what's the argument against it? Why not just do the background check, even if you believe it won't help? What's the harm in doing it?
Well, that's the problem if we do this incremental legislation. You know, what's the harm in just one more gun law? Well, see, over time, you're marching us down a road towards tyranny where we're basically going to be surrendering our firearms. And now we have people at various levels of government today who are saying now we have to get rid of long guns, we have to get rid of rifles. They're coming up with all these weird, nonsensical, non-factual statements about them being fully automatic, and they're not. One trigger pull, one discharge. Let's just cut through all the rhetoric. Let's stop attacking firearms. Let's stop attacking gun owners. Look at the root causes of violence, and there's a whole lot more things out there that are affecting our safety on a day-to-day basis than guns and vilifying good people who want nothing more than to protect their home, protect their family, and to protect their communities.
Whitmer obviously yesterday talked about, when you look at the whole situation, mental health and protecting people from having those guns. And you've seen this uptick in school shootings and school threats. Look what happened after the unfortunate incident at Oxford High School. You then have afterwards 100 other threats at area schools in Michigan. Don't you view this as a perfect opportunity to keep guns out of the wrong hands? Absolutely,
and we must make and continue to make more investments into mental health. But we have to be honest, and I like Rick, but utilizing the language that evokes fear. You know, that is the biggest problem in Michigan, is the partisan fighting. Every time there's an opportunity to come to the table to keep our state safe, to keep our children safe. 110 people dying a day at the hand of gun violence is unacceptable. 80 million children going to school and coming from homes where guns are not properly stored and put away. Young teenagers, and you know this has happened, Rick, the system has failed us. Young teenagers have been able to go into gun sales and fairs and purchase a gun even out of places like Walmart. So we have to be honest, Rick, and talk about the flaws and the fractures that are in the system that would take away all of our safety. When someone leaves this earth at the hand of gun violence, no one is asking, are they a Democrat or a Republican? We have a responsibility to make sure that we keep all of our citizens safe. And so all of the fear that we're evoking with the language saying we're trying to take guns away, that's not true. You know, I had a gun license. My license expired during COVID, and so I'll probably come and take your class again, Rick. But I still cling to the fact that we have to have those red flag laws. We have to have more mental health background checks, and we have to make sure that we are making sure that all of our citizens are safe. And just continue to use those words, those buzzwords that divide us instead of bringing us together. That's wrong. It's time for us to be more mature in our politics and make sure that we work together to keep our citizens safe.
Now, Sherry, you mentioned safe storage laws.
Yes.
You know, we've all heard the awful, unfortunate story of the 6-year-old boy in Virginia who brought a gun to school and shot his teacher. We hear countless stories in local and national news about guns winding up in small children's hands and being used. They weren't kept properly. But would a law, do you believe, change that? Are the people who are leaving guns around, are they likely to change that behavior simply because some legislation has been passed?
Yeah, well, you know, we have to do, I'm a former teacher. Always an educator. And so it's important that we, in addition to the laws, that we do what is necessary, what we've seen our Wayne County Sheriff do, what we've seen our executives talk about throughout our state, what we've seen our Chief of Police talk about, making sure that we educate and have those conversations in schools, but make sure that we're providing gun locks and places to store those weapons and having conversations with the parents. Once you become a gun owner, you have a custodial right and responsibility to make sure that it is stored properly. And unfortunately, in many homes, children are exposed to these guns and there are no locks that are placed on these guns. So it can't just be legislation. It has to be education as well. And I think we have to do a better job of doing that in a way that is bipartisan and not evoking fear.
Rick, and how would you respond to this? I mean, do you think there is an issue here?
She talked about so many different facets of the whole gun question.
But is there an issue here?
And I've been making a mental note of some of the things that she talked about. First off, she was talking about the whole mental health issue. Yes, there are people in our society who, for whatever reason, whether it's genetic or whether it's psychological, whether it's because of a drug problem, who knows what it is. They flip out, they receive their treatment, they're segregated from the community, they receive treatment. Nothing is reported on these people, what condition they had, what bad behavior they exhibited, and they're released in the community, and because of medical privacy laws, nothing is...
And who closed the mental health institutions?
I did not interrupt you at all, and they let you go twice. They let you go twice, back to back.
Go ahead.
Okay, and so these people, they flip out and they do whatever, and they go for mental evaluation, treatment, maybe they re-up their meds, and guess what? They're turned out into the system and no one updates the fact that this person had a mental issue and didn't take their medicine, and then this person goes out and commits a horrible, atrocious crime, and then you want to blame all the law-abiding citizens who didn't do anything. With respect to red flag laws, I'm glad you brought that up. This is a process that is probably the most unconstitutional, un-American concept ever. a person can come out of nowhere for whatever reason, whether it's for political reasons. You know, she and I differ on guns, but she is a great, lovely person. I love her to death. But here's the thing. If we differ on guns, right, you might have a political bias against me, and now you can go in secret and tell whatever fantastic tales you want to tell about my character, and that I'm violent, and there could be a meeting held in privacy, and then there could be a raid, a pre-dawn raid executed on my residence. I don't know what's happening. They kick in my door. If I survive a raid on my residence for just owning a gun legally because of some lie that was told against my character, right? And so now if I survive, they take my gun, and now I have to get a lawyer, and now I have to pay all of this expense to get my gun back. This is the death of what's called due process. This is America. You are considered innocent until proven guilty. No one should punish you and then penalize you and then fine you and cost you to incur expenses to prove that you are actually innocent. There are people, for whatever reason, who will create such wondrous lies about you just because they don't like you or you have a different political opinion. As a conservative, as a gun owner, I am scared to death that people might target me for political reasons and say, he's a danger to society. Let's have this secret meeting. Let's execute a raid on his house. Let's take his guns. We hope we don't kill him. But you know what? He'll cost him so much money. We will have succeeded in disarming him and keeping him from getting a gun and exercising his constitutional right. It is the most evil, heinous legislation ever devised.
Now, we do have to wrap up, but Sherry, I want to give you a quick moment just to respond. Do you believe Rick's fears in that case are founded?
Absolutely not. We're not circumventing due process, and Rick knows better than that. I'm glad that he raised the point about people being released into society. We do have to revisit making sure that we make full investment in mental health, and background checks is a part of that. And we know under whose governor's watch, Governor Engler, he closed more mental health institutions in the history of the state of Michigan. And so we have to do a better job of making sure that we look out for those who have needs. And so there is a process that is in place that does not circumvent a constitutional right, but it's that same fear stoking that comes from the party of the other side. Lots of friends on the other side of the aisle that we can have great conversations when we're not sitting on the floor voting or when we're not on television. But unfortunately, that whole tug of war takes place publicly because people are worried about winning races instead of saving lives. Let's save lives and put the politics aside. That's what's necessary, Rick.
Let me tell you, I am all for safeguarding the public. If we need to make investments in mental health, yes, to your point, there were some mental health facilities that were closed. A lot
of them.
And I didn't interrupt you,
Okay.
Sherry. And yes, could we do better with that? Absolutely. Well, gee, you know, whenever you want to do something positive, the other side always says, gee, Rick, where's the money? We don't have the money. Let me tell you, they find the money for everything that they want. Have you seen these federal budgets that have included all sorts of weird, nonsensical things? If the will is there, they'll find the money. With regards to red flag laws, I'm telling you again, it is the most evil legislation whatsoever. It is the death of due process. You are convicting and punishing someone before they had one day in court to face their accusers. I would hope that no one would ever accuse you of doing something evil, raiding your house, almost killing you, stealing your property, and heaven forbid you don't have money to defend yourself or to even take this matter to court. It is the most evil thing whatsoever.
The governor has invested $1 billion in public safety. We thank both of you for joining us tonight on set.
I think we can all agree this is a conversation that will not be settled, wrapped up anytime soon, unfortunately. So we hope to have you both back in the future.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here.
Appreciate it. Let's save lives.
All right, this is Rick Ector, Chief CPL Instructor at Rick's Firearms Academy of Detroit, and Detroit School Board member Sherry Gay Dandiogo. Thank you both for joining us. We appreciate your time, and we will be right back.
The FDA is debating whether to make COVID vaccinations annual like flu shots. I'm Michael George with why doctors say it's time to simplify the process.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Macomb County. Hi, we're CBS News Detroit. But we don't just cover the news here. We're also here, and everywhere in between. You know, the places you live, work, and play in Southeast Michigan. We're talking less of this and more of the stories that actually matter to you.
CBS News Detroit. On your block, around the clock.
That's right. Local news just found a home in your neighborhood. We're CBS News Detroit. Live, streaming, and on demand. Nice to meet you. CBS News Detroit. On your block, around the clock in Wayne County. CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Monroe County.
CBS News Detroit, the stories you care about.
Live, streaming, and on demand. We're on your block, around the clock.
Southeast Michigan news whenever you want it.
We live here. We work here.
From North Branch to Southgate.
East Point to Westland.
Wherever you live, we're here for you.
Making a difference in your neighborhood.
CBS News Detroit. Live, streaming, and on demand. Building a better newscast, one story at a time.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Oakland County.
How would you build the newscast of the future?
Expect the unexpected.
CBS News Detroit.
CBS News Detroit.
Southeast Michigan news whenever you want it.
We're ready to go live from your community.
Anywhere, anytime.
Live streaming and on demand.
If that's the name of the game.
We are ready. CBS News Detroit, in your neighborhood. Live, streaming, and on demand. In tonight's Health Watch, an FDA panel is deciding whether to make COVID vaccinations similar to annual flu shots. They say it's a simplified approach with the aim of cutting down on confusion, and it would mean that Americans would no longer have to keep track of how many shots or doses they've received. CBS News' Michael George reports from New York.
The FDA says we're at a point in the pandemic where it's time to reevaluate the nation's approach to COVID-19 vaccines.
We continue to be learning more about SARS coronavirus 2, not just about the virus, but also how it causes disease, and especially how rapidly it can evolve.
At a virtual meeting Thursday, the agency's advisory panel discussed whether to adopt a more routine approach, updating the shots every year to combat the latest strains.
FDA envisions an evidence-driven approach, similar in many ways to the process used for influenza vaccines, to monitor and update as needed the composition used in all COVID-19 vaccines.
FDA scientists say many Americans now have sufficient pre-existing immunity because of vaccination, previous infection, or a combination of both, giving them what should be enough protection to move to annual boosters. The agency is also considering transitioning to a single vaccine composition rather than different configurations for the primary series and booster doses.
I think a lot of people have found the recommendations to be very confusing and difficult to keep up with, and the idea here is to simplify that so people can follow those recommendations more easily.
More than 80% of the U.S. population has had at least one vaccine dose, but less than 20% of eligible Americans have received the latest boosters that were authorized in August. Michael George, CBS News, New York.
So the FDA says while most of the general population will need just one dose moving forward, more than one dose might be necessary for some groups, like people who are high risk, older adults, and younger children.
It's a major milestone for the Beaumont Student Heart Check program. The hospital has now screened 20,000 students for undiagnosed heart conditions. Experts say hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is the #1 cause of sudden cardiac arrest and death in young athletes. Free screenings give students and their parents knowledge and comfort.
when they're actually feeling short of breath or heavy palpitations or even chest pain or tightness in the chest or dizzy. Many times, as a parent, I've witnessed that happen. And we just tell them, come on, keep going, push. But those are symptoms that the kid would not know they're wrong. But if we look at their heart during what we're doing soon on February 4th, we'll be able to see if the heart is structurally normal.
Dr. Karam says athletes are generally young and healthy, but undiagnosed heart issues can be deadly. Early detection is key to saving lives.
To weather now, we have more snow on the way, but it won't be as heavy as yesterday's.
Thank goodness. Next weather meteorologist Ahmed Badji is back with us again to look at this forecast. How much can we expect? You're saying not a foot. Can we go as much as 6 inches?
So that's actually one of the numbers we may be watching for, is kind of like the upper end for Saturday night into Sunday. But that's a little far out still for that specific one. We can give you one of the right now. It is holding on to a few good snow showers for us. A few spots ending up with near an inch for tonight. You can see right along and south of I-69 going along toward 59 as well. Some heavier snow showers still moving through, but let's check out the city itself. Detroit, right downtown. You can see some solid snow showers moving from Hamtramck, Grosse Pointe Park, actually all the way across the river into Windsor as well. So some easygoing lake effect, at least for tonight. Something normal. We see it every year. It actually feels like this storm kind of finally kick-started our winter as we continue to barrel toward February. Now, low 30s here, upper 20s, Adrian, Ann Arbor, Mount Clemens, Lapeer, all the way down to Monroe at 27. So we're starting to get cold enough. We'll be able to start to rebuild some of the ice actually on a few different spots and even on some area roadways too. Now, breaking down the next 7 days, we want to dive right on into it right off the bat. The 30s here for us for Friday, going into the start of the day, low 20s. So, again, anything that hasn't been salted, hasn't had a chance to dry out at least a little bit, that has a chance to freeze back up again. So keep an eye out on those conditions for the morning on Friday. But Friday evening, small little clipper dives through, but it's quick. There's not a lot of moisture to use as fuel, so that's not as bad. Now, Saturday night into Sunday, that's where the next round is before we really cool down. We haven't seen 20s or even low teens in a little while. Now, for tomorrow, of course, it's around an inch from that clipper, but snow begins on Saturday in the afternoon. It continues into early Sunday morning, and it's mainly midnight Sunday until almost 4 a.m. where the higher snow totals will be. I know a lot of us will be asleep at that point, but watch for the light snow, of course, Tuesday night to be one last little burst there for us. Before tomorrow, in comes the clipper. You can see it right here as it dives on through. Otherwise, though, we get past that and we get into Saturday evening, and there's the heavier snow that's actually moving its way on through. And that is the one that we can give you a minimum. So you mentioned like 6 inches. Is that something that we'd be watching for? Yes, there's a couple. We're kind of bouncing between around 5, 6 is kind of like the top mark right now. But that's the tricky part with it. We can give you a good minimum around 2 to 3 going into Sunday morning, but that upper level, we want to nail down that number, especially with obviously the storm we just got. We don't want to have to tell you you're going to shovel more than you need.
And it's in flux. Some people want to know, well, if my weather app's telling me something, why can't I just know right now? It very much does change.
It really, really does. Yesterday it was saying an inch. Now it says a lot more than that. We don't need to worry about that number because that's going to change, but leveling out that top tier, that's what we're going to get going into tomorrow morning.
All right. Thank you, Ahmed. Coming up on CBS News Detroit at 7, men are not working like they used to. Apparently, this is an actual study, and it reveals why some men are against the regular 9 to 5. It's coming up.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Macomb County. Hi, we're CBS News Detroit. But we don't just cover the news here. We're also here, and everywhere in between. You know, the places you live, work, and play in Southeast Michigan. We're talking less of this, and more of the stories that actually matter to you.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock.
That's right, local news just found a home in your neighborhood. We're CBS News Detroit, live, streaming, and on demand. Nice to meet you. CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Wayne County. CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Monroe County.
CBS News Detroit, the stories you care about.
Live, streaming, and on demand. We're on your block, around the clock.
Southeast Michigan news whenever you want it.
We live here. We work here.
From North Branch to Southgate.
East Point to Westland.
Wherever you live, we're here for you.
Making a difference in your neighborhood.
CBS News Detroit, live, streaming, and on demand. Building a better newscast, one story at a time.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Oakland County.
How would you build the newscast of the future?
Expect the unexpected.
CBS News Detroit.
CBS News Detroit.
Southeast Michigan news whenever you want it.
We're ready to go live from your community.
Anywhere, anytime.
Live streaming and on demand.
If that's the name of the game.
We are ready. CBS News Detroit, in your neighborhood. Live, streaming, and on demand.
In tonight's Money Watch, a study conducted by the Federal Reserve of Boston found a record number of men, not included, in their prime at the working age are actually not working and not even looking for work.
Yeah, according to the study, roughly 1 in 9 men ages 25 to 54 are out of the labor market. The question is, why?
Great question. CBS News' Tony DeCopel takes a deeper dive at how this is impacting the economy.
My name's Mike Rowe, and this is my job.
Of all the jobs he's done over the past 20 years.
Now get ready to get dirty.
And Mike Rowe has done them all as the host of Dirty Jobs on Discovery.
From machines that dump. Well, now it's dirty jobs, isn't it? The hoses that suck. Gee.
He's never claimed to be an economist.
Thank you.
But while taping the series during the Great Recession of 2008, he did notice something important.
All anybody was talking about was the number of people who were out of work. But on Dirty Jobs, even then, everywhere we went, we saw help wanted signs.
It turns out dozens of real-life economists and other researchers have a possible explanation: a long-term decline in male labor force participation, or as one think tank summarized it, men not at work.
This is a men problem by and large, right?
Seems to be.
Look back to the 1950s, and 98% of men in their so-called prime working years had a job or were looking for one. That number has fallen ever since, to the point where today more than 7 million men have essentially dropped out of the workforce.
We've given a lot of people a lot of options. And incredibly, one of those options is do nothing. Do nothing.
Rowe and I met at Empire Metal, a fabrication and finishing shop in Queens, New York, and where, much like manufacturing shops nationwide, finding skilled workers like these is a growing challenge.
We have more jobs than we have people for, about 1.5 jobs for every 1 worker.
Jay Timmons, who leads the National Association of Manufacturers, describes all this as a profound problem for the companies he represents.
99.9% of them will say that their #1 challenge right now is being able to fill those open jobs.
So you are here as a representative of more than 14,000 manufacturers in these United States. And the #1 problem for 99 out of 100 of them is filling jobs.
Yeah. I never thought I'd be able to say that. But now it's kind of an all hands on deck. We've got to fill these jobs that are open.
And there are nearly 800,000 of those jobs open right now, according to the latest federal count, a number that surged in recent years as companies reinvest in American-made products, or try to anyway. And with manufacturing workers earning more than $30 an hour on average, Timmons says the problem is not pay, but perception.
It used to be dirty, dark, and dangerous. Today it's very sleek, it's very technology-driven.
And that's what we saw when we visited Electrosoft, a company outside Philadelphia that makes circuit boards for everything from missiles to submarines.
So over there is the quality area,
Okay.
where we do first piece article testing, final testing.
But CEO Carla Trotman says they could be doing more if only she had the workers to do it.
How many people work here right now?
30.
How many people do you wish worked here right now?
45.
So you got 15 people that you have jobs for,
Yes.
but you can't find them.
Cannot.
How much money in lost business is there in not being able to hire the people that you want?
Around 5 million in top line revenue.
5 million?
Yeah.
That would be here, and that presumably you'd be paying taxes on.
Obviously,
And that would
yeah.
go into people's pockets and would be going out into the broader economy.
Yeah.
What is your theory about where those 15 people are right now?
I honestly have no idea where they are.
She suspects some people may be sitting out because of a recent change in the way many of us look at work.
I think it's fulfillment. I think it's culture. I think people really want to feel as though they are appreciated. I mean, Beyonce's song, she said, release your job. A lot of people release their jobs. They don't, and they realize, I mean, it's an overall feeling of being fed up and being taken for granted.
But there's more, according to one economist. Some non-working men face a skills mismatch. A third have criminal records, making them ineligible for many jobs and making employers hesitant to hire them. And many rely on safety nets, such as disability. So you may wonder, what are these guys doing instead of work? Well, kind of what you might expect. Spending nearly 7 hours each weekday on average, relaxing, playing games, and watching TV.
So how is it, from where you're sitting, from your understanding, that people can do nothing all day and still have enough money for a bag of chips?
Oh, well, it's almost as though some entity is paying them. It's almost as if somebody is not letting them fail. It's as if some giant parent somewhere has...
An uncle, maybe?
Could be a rich uncle, yes. Could be a very wealthy uncle.
Or it might come down to values. As many public schools have stopped offering shop class, many students have stopped even considering jobs like the ones Roe has spotlighted, dirty or otherwise.
It goes back to the stigmas and stereotypes and myths and misperceptions that are keeping guidance counselors from talking about opportunities like this to the kids in their care. It's those things that are keeping parents from putting all the options on the table.
How big of an issue is it to have this many people sitting on the sideline?
It's only a matter of our national identity. I think it's a giant issue, and by the time we realize how big an issue it is, we're going to have a hard time turning the temperature down.
Tony DeCopel, CBS News.
The numbers are shocking. So roughly 1 in 9 not in the workforce. When he talked about them spending 7 hours a day on just leisure time, this seems shocking to me. And when you consider, you know, women are outpacing men in college graduation rates, to what end does this go? Where are we headed?
I think it's interesting because today, compared to 100 years ago, there's way more women in the workforce today.
Absolutely.
And so potentially on the other side of it, when you talk about childcare and things like that, maybe you look at more stay-at-home dads today than there was 100 years ago.
Sure.
The situation has flipped a little
But
bit.
that research is talking about leisure, not parenting.
Right. No, I understand. And so it's a difficult situation. You wonder, how far is this going to go as we continue with AI technology and things like that? Where is this going to take us?
Very interesting story from Tony DeCopel. We'll be right back.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Macomb County. Hi, we're CBS News Detroit. But we don't just cover the news here. We're also here, and everywhere in between. You know, the places you live, work, and play in Southeast Michigan. We're talking less of this, and more of the stories that actually matter to you.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock.
That's right, local news just found a home in your neighborhood. We're CBS News Detroit, live, streaming, and on demand. Nice to meet you. CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Wayne County. Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Monroe County.
CBS News Detroit, the stories you care about.
Live, streaming, and on demand. We're on your block, around the clock.
Southeast Michigan news whenever you want it.
We live here. We work here.
From North Branch to Southgate.
East Point to Westland.
Wherever you live, we're here for you.
Making a difference in your neighborhood.
CBS News Detroit, live, streaming, and on demand. Building a better newscast, one story at a time.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Oakland County.
How would you build the newscast of the future?
Expect the unexpected.
CBS News Detroit.
CBS News Detroit.
Southeast Michigan news whenever you want it.
We're ready to go live from your community.
Anywhere, anytime.
Live streaming and on demand.
That's the name of the game.
We are ready. CBS News Detroit, in your neighborhood. Live, streaming, and on demand.
Two new Meijer locations are open for business here in Michigan. The grocery store chain offered a sneak peek of both stores last week ahead of their grand opening this morning. In addition, both stores gave $10,000 to two local nonprofits. The Lake Orion store donated to the Woodside Bible Church's Village Food Pantry, and the Macomb Township store gave their contribution to the Macomb Charitable Foundation.
It's a big day for the Mitten State. Michigan turns 186 today. The Great Lakes State was founded on this day back in 1837. So what else was going on back then? Well, Martin Van Buren was elected as the 8th president of the United States. $1 back in 1837 would be the equivalent of almost $3,000 today. And that's also when John Deere began manufacturing its iconic tractor. Happy birthday, Michigan.
I wish I had those prices, because that $1, whew, I'd be a rich man. Hey, look, the USFL is bringing some of his talent to the D. That story's on deck when we return.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Macomb County. Hi, we're CBS News Detroit. But we don't just cover the news here. We're also here, and everywhere in between. You know, the places you live, work, and play in Southeast Michigan. We're talking less of this and more of the stories that actually matter to you.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock.
That's right, local news just found a home in your neighborhood. We're CBS News Detroit, live, streaming, and on demand. Nice to meet you. CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Wayne County. CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Monroe County.
CBS News Detroit, the stories you care about.
Live, streaming, and on demand. We're on your block, around the clock.
Southeast Michigan news whenever you want it.
We live here. We work here.
From North Branch to Southgate.
East Point to Westland.
Wherever you live, we're here for you.
Making a difference in your neighborhood.
CBS News Detroit, live, streaming, and on demand. Building a better newscast, one story at a time.
CBS News Detroit, on your block, around the clock in Oakland County.
How would you build the newscast of the future?
Expect the unexpected.
CBS News Detroit.
CBS News Detroit.
Southeast Michigan news whenever you want it.
We're ready to go live from your community.
Anywhere, anytime.
Live streaming and on demand.
That's the name of the game.
we are ready.
CBS News Detroit, in your neighborhood. Live, streaming, and on demand.
Welcome back. We're joined by sports anchor Ronnie Duncan. And Ronnie, the Lions are not going to be the only football team in town right now. What I'm trying to figure out, though, is why the Philadelphia Stars are going to be making their home field Ford Field.
Because this is not the city of brotherly love, but we bring all the brothers and the sisters here to play a little bit of football. I guess that's the only thing I can come up with, Jeff. But I'm telling you right now, what the USFL is doing is that they have a hub. And they want to make sure that football fans who are going to go to football games have an opportunity. When they were down in Birmingham, that was not the case. I mean, we saw bigger crowds of high school games. But I think it's going to be a better attraction right here in Detroit. Let's see what happens. Hello, everybody. Ronnie Duncan with your sports. Football. How much football is too much football? Apparently, there's never enough in Detroit. The new USFL is coming to Detroit, and they are serious about their brand of football. Yes, I'm talking football just like we see in the NFL. The league says that Michigan, the Panthers, and the Philadelphia Stars will be playing right here in Detroit for the 2023 season. And the mayor says he's ready for the great fans of Detroit to cheer on another team while we kick off things April 30th.
It's 10 more dates that people come into downtown Detroit, support the surrounding businesses, and of course, it puts the city of Detroit in the national spotlight another 10 weekends a year. We're very excited about it.
Hey, Mayor, we are excited, but there is some sad news to report. Jesse Lemonnier, a former linebacker with the Lions and a recent signee with the USFL, has died. Lemonnier was just 25 years old. There is no cause of death. Some other news to turn to. Former U of N, I'm talking Michigan star running back Tyrone Wheatley is coming back home, so to speak. The former head coach of Morgan State University in Baltimore and the Inkster, Michigan native, has now taken on the head coaching job with Wayne State. This is going to be huge for Wayne State because Wheatley knows the area. And one thing I do know, he is a great recruiter. Tom Brady. You know what? He is back in the spotlight, but it's not for his work on the field or loss in the playoffs. As Dana Backus has a closer look at a new film and some special stars that are joining him for one of the biggest games.
If Tom Brady can make it to the Super Bowl, so can we.
TV icons Lily Tomlin, Jane Fonda, Rita Moreno, and Sally Field are joining forces in the big-hearted comedy 80 for Brady. The film is inspired by the true story of four best friends on a wild trip to the 2017 Super Bowl, all to see their hero Tom Brady play.
The fact that it was based on a real story is so sweet.
I like the fact that they're showing women as sports fans.
80 for Brady opens in theaters February 3rd.
I love that.
Yes.
You know what? It's like the Golden Girls meets football, the NFL, and Tom Brady. It's 4-1.
You got the goat of football. You've got four goats of acting. Those
Yeah.
are some legendary, iconic women there, and I think it's just going to be adorable. I'm looking forward to that
think
movie.
of West Side Story, Rita Moreno, you think of Jane Fonda, and I think
Sally
of
Field,
Dancing
Lily Tomlin.
Exercise DVDs. Or no, VHS.
The ladies.
Yes, VHS back then.
The ladies love Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, they're against him in the Super Bowl.
Hey, well, they don't have to worry about it this year.
No, they do not.
I wish it was, oh man, some of the Super Bowl weather, you just think warmer thoughts. We're almost at Super Bowl time, but we're still here in the tundra.
I know, and well, see, we're gonna heat up the Super Bowl next year when the Lions are in, right?
That's right, in Las Vegas.
Yeah, see, there we
So
go.
we're all going.
I love it.
And you can do I can tell you the weather
all around.
forecast. It's going to be sunny. It's going to be dry. It's going to be hot.
We got 2 plane tickets ready. You and I were going to go.
Oh, how about that?
Perfect.
Okay.
So here's what we got going on in that forecast. It's not warm at all here. We've got actually a ton of cold air building in going through the next week and a half. The next 6 to 10 day out, it's all blue. That's all there is. I mean, it's a big bubble right over Wisconsin and actually northern Illinois before it ends up over top of us by the end of next week.
Whew. All right, we'll be ready for it.
I
Thank
wish
you,
I had
Ahmed.
better news.
Not the best outlook, but we'll get through it, and we know you will keep us ahead of it. Thank you for joining us tonight at 7 as we stream on the CBS News app.
For Ahmed Badji, Ronnie Duncan, Shanna Humphreys, I'm Jeff